Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to connect some seriously old-school philosophy to the absolute bleeding edge of artificial intelligence.
So let's just jump right in with a huge question, one that's been on the minds of thinkers for centuries, and now it's at the very core of AI. Think about it. How does your mind, or an AI's mind for that matter, take a big abstract idea like justice, or even something simple like chair, and connect it to the messy, complicated, real world out there?
To get to the bottom of this, we've got to go back, way back, about 250 years to the philosopher Immanuel Kant. He was the one who first really identified this critical gap in our understanding of, well, understanding. He saw this disconnect, this kind of unbuilt bridge between the concepts we have in our heads and the raw data that's constantly flooding in through our senses.
Kant gave this missing link a very fancy name, a transcendental schema. And it's a wonderfully tricky idea, but stick with me. He said it's not a static image. The schema for dog, for instance, isn't a picture of one particular dog. Nope, it's more like a rule, a recipe, a kind of mental procedure for how dogness plays out over time. It's this obscure but absolutely essential process that makes sense of everything.
Okay, so how does this bridge actually work in practice? Let's break it down. You start with the pure abstract concept, like the general idea of dog. Then comes the schema. That's the secret sauce, the generative rule. It's the go-between that lets your mind connect that big idea to the specific barking, tail-wagging creature you see right in front of you. Without that schema, the concept is just empty, and the experience is just noise.
All right, let's fast forward from the 1700s to today. How is this old philosophical puzzle still a thing? Well, it turns out AI researchers have been on their own quest to build a computational version of this exact bridge for decades now. And let's just say the early blueprints had some issues.
On one hand, you had symbolic AI. Think of it like handwriting a very specific script, a checklist for what happens at a restaurant, for example. It was structured. You could see exactly what it was doing, which was great. But it was incredibly rigid, brittle. The second reality went off script, the whole thing would just break. On the other hand, you have today's predictive models, like neural networks. These are amazing. They learn from tons of data. They're dynamic. But, and it's a big but, they're often total black boxes. We get the right answer, but we have no earthly idea how it got there. And this really gets to the heart of the problem. The cognitive scientist Stephen Harnad absolutely nailed it back in 1990. He said that these purely symbolic systems are parasitic on the meaning in our heads. It's a brilliant way to put it. Without a real connection to experience, to what things look, feel, and sound like, all the symbols inside an AI are just empty tokens being shuffled around. It's the classic symbol grounding problem.
So this brings us to a really fascinating, fresh idea. What if we could get around all that? What if instead of trying to program the bridge by hand, or just hoping it magically appears inside a black box, an AI could actually learn to build its own bridge? And what if it did that by learning the fundamental shapes of how things happen over time?
This new approach is called the curve ontology. And the core idea is honestly so elegant. Instead of us having to hard code these Kantian schema, the AI learns them. It learns them as dynamic mathematical curves, as temporal patterns that it pulls straight from raw data. So for example, the AI might just discover on its own that growth often looks like an S-curve, or that a sudden shock looks like a sharp spike on a graph. These shapes, these curves, become its fundamental vocabulary for understanding the world.
And what's so powerful about this is how it just neatly solves so many of those old problems, right? It learns from data, so it isn't brittle. Its building blocks are these dynamic patterns, not static categories. It even allows for what the sources call epistemic pluralism, which is just a fancy way of saying there can be more than one right pattern for the same idea. But here's the kicker. It's interpretable. Because the learned patterns are just mathematical curves, we can actually look at them. We can see the bridge the AI has built. It's not a black box anymore.
But the idea gets even better. Because to make this bridge as strong and reliable as possible, you need a really solid foundation. And while simple curves are a good start, if you want to capture the true, chaotic messiness of the real world, you're going to need a more powerful mathematical tool. So think of it this way. A simple polynomial curve, That's like trying to describe an entire, complex piece of music with just one single line. You'll get a very rough, global idea. But wavelets? Oh, wavelets are different. They're tailor-made for the kind of complex, ever-changing data you see in real life, like a stock chart or the rhythm of human emotions. Instead of one big shape, they break the signal down into all its different components, at different moments in time and at different scales.
This makes wavelets a total game changer for this task. They essentially give the AI a set of super-powered senses. They're perfect for data that's all over the place, where the rules seem to change moment to moment. They can pinpoint not just that something happened, but exactly when it happened and how fast or slow it was. It's like being able to see both the huge, big-picture trend and the tiny, split-second details all at once. It means the AI can spot patterns that are just way too subtle or happen way too fast for any other method to catch.
So, let's pull all the way back. What does this all mean? What happens when we finally build a working Kantian bridge inside an AI? Maybe one that's supercharged with wavelets? Well, the implications they're enormous. We're not just talking about a slightly smarter AI anymore. We're talking about systems that are genuinely grounded in reality.
I mean, just imagine AI companions that don't just follow your commands, but actually learn and understand your unique emotional patterns from your biodata. Or how about an AI scientist that can just sift through mountains of research data and discover new temporal patterns, new laws of nature maybe, that no human has ever seen? You could have robots that land in a totally new environment and figure out the rules of that place completely on their own. Some researchers even think this could be a path toward an AI that learns ethics, not by reading a philosophy book, but by actually observing the patterns of human well-being and suffering in the world.
And that leaves us with one last pretty provocative thought to chew on. If an AI can truly build its own bridge to reality, if it can form its own concepts from scratch, straight from the raw patterns of experience, could it one day start to understand our world in ways that are totally new? Maybe even in ways that we, as humans, can't quite wrap our heads around?